Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Roxanne Nazario with Speak Up, and we are going to be talking today about AB 1316. I am joined by Angelica Solis Montero with the LA Coalition for Excellent Public Schools. We also have two parents joining us today as well. Michael Mcdaniel with Families in Action in Oakland and Christina Laster with the National Parents Union. So we want to quickly jump in and give a little bit of context to what we're going to be talking about today. So there's a sweeping scope and scale of AB 1316 that would really fundamentally damage the operations and missions of all California charter schools. The California legislature already made significant reforms back in 2019 that addressed transparency and accountability reforms. It is simply premature to layer new requirements on charter public schools when the positive impact of the new laws have not been evaluated yet. The reference to fraud that is noted as a trigger to this bill occurred well before these significant changes in the law. And why are we basing laws off one incident and maybe one bad operator to begin with? And that's something we'll discuss a little bit more as well. But just to give you some more context and go back to 2019, many of us were fighting multiple bills at that time. There was a package of bills, about 6 in total, and about 3 of them did get through and pass through the legislature. One was SB 126, which specifically applies to the Brown Act, Government Code Section 1090, the Political Reform Act, and the Public Records Act to charter schools, that way that they would provide greater transparency in their operations. The other bill that passed in 2019 and went into effect last year is AB 1505 by Assemblyman O'Donnell. This increased authorizer discretion in the charter school renewal process. It also added a requirement for community impact reports and other restrictions on new charter schools applying for a new petition to open a new school. And lastly, we had AB 1505, which addressed a number of issues related to non-classroom-based charter schools, including a 2-year moratorium on online charter schools that ends in 2022. We'll get into more of the details in this, but I would like to point out that, it's interesting that we spend a lot of time, the legislature spends a lot of time focusing on charter schools, which account for about 10% of the public schools throughout the state. I think at a time when we should be focusing on putting more resources in the classroom, AB 1316 would actually take away those options. And in addition, we'll discuss about the timing of this bill, which I think is very key, especially since we have the 2-year moratorium on non-classroom based charter schools, which means online, which is ending in 2022. And we are seeing a lot of parents starting to make a change and make a jump to online charter schools and other programs that are more flexible for their children. So we'll get into more of that, but I'm going to pass it over to Angelica, and she's going to share some more information about AB 1316.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roxanne. Again, I'm Angelica Solis Montero. I am the executive director of the LA Coalition for Excellent Public Schools. But I think most importantly, I am a parent of a charter school student. I made the choice when I was looking for options for my daughter to move her into a charter school here in Los Angeles. And so for me, this isn't just about my life's work to ensure equity and access to students, but it's very personal. And so we're going to start off by walking you through what this bill is, AB 1316. By O'Donnell, what it does to our schools and to our options as families. But before we go into the bill, I want to be able to just share a little bit, right, about what are charter schools. I think many of you may know, but just for those of you that don't, charter schools are tuition-free public schools. They're open to all students. They're independently operated, and they run with more flexibilities than traditional public schools in exchange for increased accountability. So you'll hear a lot about accountability being discussed. As Roxanne just mentioned, there were a slew of bills 2 years ago that addressed transparency and accountability issues. And so charter schools have always been held very accountable for the outcomes of their students. And if they're not performing, they get shut down. So who do charter schools serve? So quick overview, there are 1,310 charter schools in the state of California. 675,000 students attend California charter schools. Roxanne also mentioned that 10% of public school students attend charter schools. There are over 6 million students attending traditional schools in the state of California. So when you think about the number of students that are attending charter schools, we're a big group, but we're also pretty small compared to the larger population. So it really has to make you wonder, why is it that there are these efforts and these energies and these bills continuously targeting charter schools, right? And where is accountability and legislation to mitigate low achievement of traditional schools, right? Where traditional schools are not performing, how are they being held accountable? I'll give you some data here, really specifically around Black and Latinx students in California. So 52% of charter schools in California, of charter school students in California are Latino. This is across the state. In some districts like LAUSD, for example, that number is much higher. So 66% of charter school students are Latino in the LAUSD district. Statewide, we have 4.9% of Black students that are enrolled in traditional public schools, and 7.2% of Black students are enrolled in public charter schools. And we want to share this data because I think this is really important to know. These are schools that have been chosen by the students and their families, right? No one forced me to attend the school that my daughter is attending or to have her attend that school. That is a choice that I've made. And so all of these Latinx and Black students and their families are choosing charter public schools for their students. So now, what is this bill? So AB 1316 was reintroduced earlier this year, and it limits high quality public education opportunities for our kids, and it fundamentally changes the operations of California charter public schools. And specifically what that means is that it is going to it increases the district oversight fees for nonprofit charter public schools. Again, in California, all of our charter public schools are nonprofit schools. And this increase can result in up to 30% funding cuts for many schools, right? So again, in a time when we are emerging out of this pandemic, there are going to be funds that are going to be taken and given up to a bureaucracy instead of remaining in our schools and in our classrooms. It cuts funding for programs that serve low-income, minority, and at-risk students, right? So there will be money that is going to be taken out of the classroom, again, in a time when we need it most to remain in our schools and for our students. And it has severe consequences for charter school flexibility and personalized programs. So there are schools that focus on special needs students. There are schools that focus on migrant students. There are schools that offer many personalized programs for the students that need those flexibilities. And this bill would adversely impact those schools and their ability to serve the needs of our students. So what are we going to do about it, right? So one of the things that we have done, the organizations that are represented on the panel, many of you who are at home, we've partnered with our partners at the California Charter School Association and other advocates who understand that to meet the needs of our students, we need to be able to provide students and families with educational options. And so the first thing we did when the language of the bill is that a lot of us began to reach out to legislators and to talk about the impact, the negative impact that this is going to have on our schools. We want to be able to have and support legislations that promote solutions and support school options for families. This legislation does not do that, right? And another big piece about it is really mobilizing not just charter school families, but families who understand that, especially sort of coming out of this pandemic, we need to continue to protect school options for all of our families. And so we want to mobilize folks to be able to speak to legislators, to speak to other family leaders, to speak to school leaders about what this bill does and the damage that it does to our schools. And of course, we want to call on everyone to join social media. We want to thank all of you who are on Facebook. We want you to continue to share this with other community leaders, with other families, and most importantly, to communicate this with our state legislators, right? All of the impacts that this bill has on our families. So when do we do this? Today. We do this today. The bill was already introduced in the state legislature. It has moved through the Education Committee and the Appropriations Committee in the State Assembly, in the Assembly side of the House. On March 12th, again, all of us and many others joined together to begin to do outreach to let people know of how severe this bill is and the impacts that it has in our schools. It's already moved out of the Appropriations Committee, right? It had until today to move out. And so come Monday, May 24th, it could be heard on the Assembly floor. Between Monday the 24th through June 4th, on any of those days, the bill could hit the floor. What that means is that all of the Assembly members of California will vote on this bill. That's why we have really to mobilize today on Monday morning and every day until we know this bill is going to hit the floor. We need to mobilize and let legislators know our true concerns and our real concerns about the impact of this bill on our communities. The time is now. We are up against the wall as far as time is concerned to be able to let people know about the harms of this bill. And so again, very specifically, what can you do? At the tail end of this program, we're going to give you very specific links and information for how to get involved, but we need you to make your voice heard. We need you to help to amplify this message on social media, and we need you to meet with legislators, whether it's virtually, whether it's making calls to them, whether it's in person. They need to hear your voices because you are their constituents. Again, this bill is going to be voted on by all of the Assembly members now when it hits the floor between May 24th and June 4th. And so we really need everyone to engage their legislators and let them know the impacts of this bill. So with that, we're going to hear a little bit more now from the rest of the panelists who are going to really share examples and real life concerns about the bill.
Thank you so much, Angelica. That was really, really thorough and informative. And we are going to jump to parents in just a second here. I also wanted to mention, I appreciate you sharing your personal connections to this as well. And I just want to add really quickly that I am a charter school parent myself as well, looking to switch to an online option in the fall after finding that 14, 15 months of distance learning, online learning is great for my daughter. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Christina Laster. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, share a little bit of your story.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with my co-parents, really talking about our quality education choices and options for our children. I am Christina Laster. I am the Director of Policy and Legislation with the National Parents Union, but I am more so a proud mom of 4 and an excited grandmother of 3. All of my children attend public charter school. Our personalized learning platform have been very successful. in those educational environments and are thriving. I'm excited that they have the opportunity and the access to learn and thrive in the ways that support their modality of learning, meaning their learning style. That's why I chose to put them in those various platforms that support them best. And so I am really upset about the timing and the continued attacks on our children's education. I believe that Angelica and Roxanne said very good. There are 6 million students in the state of California who really need a lot of energy and the same type of energy to academically achieve. But it's only a 700,000 that have chosen other things that support our children's modalities of learning to learn to be able to thrive that get constantly attacked. And I think that we're the parents every year that have to continue to show up and fight to continue to have our quality options in education for our children. As you know, 80% of Black students in the state of California can't do math at grade level, and 67% can't read or write at grade level. And I chose for my grandson and my son not to be a part of that, to be able to learn and thrive and have a future and a hope. So I'm so glad to be able to be here and advocate with and for parents. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that. We're happy to have you as well. And next we're going to go to Michael, and he's going to share his story and a little bit of his background with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Mcdaniel. I'm a family organizer with Families in Action for Quality Education. I'm also an Oakland native, born and raised, the father of four, two that are charter school students and one that's a traditional public district student. It's extremely important to me and has been for a long time that these people that are most impacted are these children, these scholars, these communities that are most impacted. They see somebody that's standing up and taking the fight to these people that looks like they do, that comes from where they come from. All too often, we, have situations where a lot of people from our community don't show up either because they've been held back and oppressed for so very long. They don't really feel like that they have any kind of agency or power to make any kind of change. My brother and sister weren't done exactly so well by, the normal education system. My parents had to use other people's addresses just so that I could kind of have a fair shake. And that's not right. No kid should have to go through that just so that they can have an equitable chance at a quality education. Everybody should have, at least a level playing field when it comes to opportunities in life. And just because, we're Black or brown doesn't mean that we are not supposed to be afforded any less of an equal chance than anybody else that's out here. Like they've been saying, there's only 650,000, charter school students in the whole of California. How is it that number is siphoning away and stealing kids from a system that has over 6 million? These aren't private schools, people. Charter schools are public schools. They're free. Anybody ever told you you need to pay to come here? That's not a charter school, and it never has been. That's a private school, and you've been had. Anybody that's telling you from the other side that, oh my God, they're privatizers. No, again, public. Key word there. There's just a lot of rhetoric and negativity that goes on around this conversation, and I always try to do my best to inject a little more honesty, truth, and transparency to the situation, as a single Black father and somebody that's trying to be a leader of my community. So, thank you very much for having me here. Glad to be part of the conversation.
Whew, thank you. I couldn't agree more with those points. You made some really, really important points. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm going to go over to Tanisha next. And if you could just share a little bit about, yourself and maybe your children, their journey so far.
Hi, my name is Tanisha Hall. I am the founder of Whitehall Arts Academy, which is a nonprofit performing arts academy in South Los Angeles. And I live in South LA in 90047. And my local high school is, which is one of the worst high schools in the entire LAUSD. I'm a foster parent of 5 children. I've so far had 2 that went through GPAs were both in the 1 point something, no matter how hard we fought. My oldest is a senior right now, which they did not transition through the pandemic well at all. And my daughter, even though I fought, she's an IEP student, she had a 1.5 GPA. Was failing PE because the teacher said that she had on the wrong sweatpants while doing her jumping jacks at home in her bedroom during a pandemic. So my youngest daughter, I took her out after the first semester because I said this is not going to happen anymore, and I enrolled her in. I have since enrolled my middle daughter, who's a senior. She went from having a 1.5 GPA, now she has a 3 point something semester GPA. She's getting A's and B's in all of her classes. She's getting over 90 minutes IEP support every single week, which at her IEP support was come sit in the dean's office during lunch. That was her IEP support. The teachers wrap around my youngest daughter, who's 15 in the 10th grade. We've been dealing with some issues with her this year, and the entire staff almost wrapped around this child. She receives 4 hours of services a week from teachers coming in and tutoring with her or just sitting with her, on Zoom and making sure she's doing her work. That's not going to happen at a public school. And when you have children like mine who are in the foster system and have been traumatized and we're dealing with, accelerated issues, going to schools where they're in this demonized, almost prisonized environment where the teachers are treating them like they're villains and they're just trying to come to school and they don't understand like the things the children are dealing with at home. So it is an online charter school, which is amazing. It's phenomenal. I participate as a parent and also as a vendor. So I'm able to teach the other children and I deal with the parents and, some children are alternative learners. Some children need, a different environment. It's been awesome for me, for my kids, because, there's not really any schools in this area that I feel like can properly support my children and their learning. So this bill would completely annihilate. It would make us actually ineligible to participate because based on the new bill, you can only, enroll in schools that are in your area. In July last year, my youngest son, he had his left hand amputated from a firework accident that happened. And so now he has a 504 plan and he's supposed to go to middle school next year. He already said he doesn't feel comfortable going into the classroom, especially dealing with his injury. And he wants to study at home. If this bill passes, that will not be an option for him. So I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with my now disabled child and, so that he can be in a comfortable learning environment. So this bill, I feel like it disproportionately attacks our brown and black babies. Like I said, as a parent in the neighborhood where all these schools are terrible, they're terrible. There's not one good school in this, even some of the other ones, there's not one good school in this neighborhood that I would send my children to get an adequate education. And the charter schools are our only option. I don't have $1,500 a month or more to spend on private school education, and I shouldn't be penalized because the local public schools, they hire people who are inadequate, untrained, and don't care. So this bill definitely needs to receive a no. It should not have even gotten this far as I'm concerned, because it is a brutal attack on the future of our Black and brown minority students in Los Angeles and California.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. I really couldn't agree more. And the online charter school that my daughter is going to in the fall is also. And I also live in a community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley where our public schools, my daughter's homeschool is a 2 out of 10 on greatschools.org. So I totally understand. And also having a daughter who's scared to go back to school in the fall, not even dealing with some of the challenges that your son has. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. I do want to jump in a couple more questions where we can get into.
You're
like went mute.
Oh, my mic went mute. Sorry. Thank you. So just real quickly, I want to ask a couple more questions. But as we talked about, AB 1316 will limit the opportunity for charter schools to respond to the needs of their students, particularly, as Tanisha pointed out, the most vulnerable and underserved students who may require a more flexible schedule. AB 1316 severely limits flexibility in school schedules that many students rely on to continue their education. This includes working students, teen parents, migrant students, and students with disabilities. So I want to ask you what, and I'm going to go to Christina first again, why do you think it's important for families to have access to flexible educational programs?
Yeah, so a lot of times people, think, well, the IEP is servicing students well in the traditional school environment. But what they don't understand is that students with disabilities have multiple layers of needs, right? Have appointments outside of the, in educational environment, have other care providers, maybe mental health, medical care appointments, right? And so we have to be able to pivot and make sure that our children are receiving all of those multifaceted services. It's not just about their educational well-being. It's also about their medical well-being. It's also about their mental health well-being. And, that traditional schedule does not suit our children very well, right? So also, if you think about students that have maybe some severe allergies, my daughter has a severe citrus allergy. She carries an EpiPen, and I will tell you that when she was in the traditional educational environment, they did not protect her well, right? There was citrus all around, and even though I fought and advocated for years for them to protect her citrus allergy, just like they would a peanut allergy, it was so hard and it took so long for them to understand that this is life-threatening. And that she can go into anaphylaxis. And so I need to be able to protect her from having that allergic response that would then trigger her asthma attack, right? And if they weren't willing to be able to be flexible to allow for the missed days that she also had, you know what I mean? To go to doctor's appointments, to go to respiratory therapists, to go to allergy specialists, and not penalize her, then that was not the appropriate environment for her, to be able to learn and thrive. And so I think flexibility really does address that. Me being a former teenage parent, I understand that there's also a multi-layer of needs, right? Throughout a teenage pregnancy, and whatever people feel about that, that's their opinion, but we need to be able to provide the support and the services to help those students make it over the finish line. They also may have various scheduled meetings and things that they're going to have to attend, but that doesn't mean that we can't offer them what they need to be successful, to get their high school, graduation in order, and then be able to go into higher ed or whatever they choose, right? And so the flexibility affords students, just like my daughter, just like how I was, the opportunities to succeed and to thrive.
Thank you so much, Christina. Same question to Michael.
Well, I know, a lot of people try to say like education is just to kind of, slap it on and it either works, sticks or it doesn't. But it's not a one size fit all type of situation. Every family has its own very unique nuances that they have to deal with. And the ability to have choices of how we can best address our individual scholar situation is important. A lot of times, a lot of people that end up in charter schools, and what is not said, are people that were already failed by traditional district public schools. They didn't offer them the services that they needed, or they didn't offer them adequately. They missed in the boat on a lot of things. So a lot of these parents had to make decisions that were best for them and their families. And so they pivoted to places with more flexibility for their child. A lot of times, even it's not even necessarily a connotation of even disability or hardship. A person could just have a different way they need to understand the material. So an IEP is developed. It says, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied into those other things, but it's necessary that every individual is allowed to have that level of freedom to choose what works best for them and their family and their situation. You know, what if it's a single parent like me and we're working all the time? You know, I have time to take everybody to schools and everything all the time? Maybe I don't. And an IEP is something that works best for me and my family. Now, this bill comes in and it wants to completely strip away that, you know, flexibility from charter schools altogether and make them incumbent to try to offer these services in person, which would totally cripple that school system, which doesn't do anything to uplift and service those kids. Like, what happens to those kids then once you strip this away from them?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for all of those points as well. And then lastly, Tanisha, if you want to chime in real quickly on that, and then we'll go to another question as well.
You know, I've been in my youngest son, the one who was injured, is still in LAUSD, which thankfully and prayerfully, he has the same teacher he had last year. So even though he wasn't with me through foster care last year, my children are relatives. So I knew the teacher, and she's been so supportive, and the school has been so supportive. Yet we've had to miss so much school, like, you know, tapping into what Michael was saying, because of doctor's appointments and this and that. The first half of the school year, like, we were out and the teacher was just so understanding. And I believe it's because she, you know, we had a relationship, but if we didn't have that relationship, you know, this could have been terrible. And this is why, you know, looking at, you know, the option with my other children, you know, I'm in the online, and I like online because it is a more structured program than just because of my personal schedule. I don't have the time to really kind of like structure it. Online is so awesome. The classes are there. The teachers are so supportive. But you have the flexibility to do the work at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 p.m. or 9 a.m., whatever works for you. But yeah, and we're looking forward to moving forward with him. Like, we have so much therapy that we're about to get into, and that really will cut into a traditional school day. And again, like with my daughter that has the IEP, you know, being able to get those services, you know, even outside of the regular school day, like we can do tutoring at like 6 p.m., you know, where the school day, if it doesn't happen within that school day, it's a wrap. I believe that charter schools, they're more flexible. They work more with the family. They work more with what does your kid need? My oldest, the one that's a senior right now, we got her accepted into Grand Canyon University. So she will be the first from her family to go to a university directly from high school. The first is breaking generational curses. And this is what it's about. And, you know, was barely trying to get her out. She would have basically failed. She would not have graduated, you know, and I had to fight. I was fighting with teachers and fighting with the dean and fighting with the principal, to the point where the principal, you know, which is where I finally drew my line. The principal set up a meeting with myself and my daughter and did not even show up. The principal in high school didn't show up and didn't even have the decency or courtesy to, you know, contact and say, hey, sorry, I didn't make it. When I reached, nothing, we heard nothing. And you're supposed to be in charge of my child's education in her senior year of high school. Never again in life will my child's future be put in your hands. Not at all. I immediately moved her. And again, like I said, everyone has wrapped around. They're so supportive. My 15-year-old has a business. The teachers all bought products from her business to support her for Christmas, you know? So I personally cannot say enough about my experience, again, as both a parent and as a vendor, you know. And this, as a vendor, it threatens I don't have a teaching credential, even though I've been teaching music for 20 years. I have a bachelor's degree in music, but I don't have my teaching credential because I just never felt like getting it. But we've been teaching in schools for over 10 years. That would prevent us from being able to provide these services to the students. I don't need a teaching credential to teach a kid guitar for 30 minutes or to teach a kid how to play the piano for 30 minutes. I'm not in charge of you learning how to read and write and all of that, but I utilize my music to be supplementary. So you're learning how to apply the math and music. You're learning how to apply the understanding and songwriting. You know, there's no need for us to have a teaching credential because we're supplementary vendors. But the bill is just coming in to completely annihilate this system, which is really working and helping these children thrive.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important point. And, they already had that in AB 1505 about, teachers who teach elective classes and things like that getting credentialed. So if they have ballet classes at the school, now that ballet teacher who's been teaching ballet for 25 years has to go get a teaching credential to teach ballet. In my opinion, these are just ways to strip charter schools of what makes them special, what makes them unique, what makes them innovative. Let's take away everything that makes them so appealing so that less people will want to go to them, I think is the bottom line. And you're just making me really excited to get my daughter started in online program in the fall, which is where she's going, because my daughter has a lot of social anxiety. Going to school gives her so much anxiety. And then you add COVID on top of it, and she's terrified. I can't get her to go anywhere in public, much less school. So thank you for sharing that. It just makes me excited about that. But I want to make sure that other kids have these opportunities, not just mine and yours. Any kid that needs this. And I want to clarify before we go into the next question, we're talking about charter schools, but this is not just about charter parents and us being attacked again. This is going to affect all parents who ever want to make a different choice. And after COVID, many people are looking at taking these on these programs that they maybe never would have considered before, right? So again, just going back to timing really being key. Let me jump into the next question because this is also important.
Before you do, Roxanne, just really quick, I want to invite folks to comment on the chat, to put your questions on the chat, engage with us, let us know what you think. Do you have stories or examples of how this bill is going to challenge your school? Please put it on the chat. We want to hear from you.
Thank you. That's a great reminder. Yes, please. We've had some people really interacting in the chat, in the comments. Please continue to, especially your stories we want to hear. So as we've talked about, AB 1316 is a bad proposition and negatively affects California students, families, and teachers. It draws money away from, that's currently being used for student services, increases operating fees, resulting in up to 30% in funding cuts for many schools. So my question, going to Christina first, is AB 1316 will increase district supervision fees, taking more money back to the bureaucracy by up to 30%. What would be the best use of those funds if they stayed in the schools or in online programs?
So I'd like to boldly say that I really don't agree with the fact that the establishment that failed our children should get money to then supervise their educations, because obviously they didn't know how to do it right. Okay. We weren't forced. We were forced out maybe, but we weren't forced to choose the options we chose. And, they really don't have the fiscal management for their own entities and their own established institutions. I see a lot of fiduciary negligence. I see a lot of fiscal misuse and mishandling of funds without accountability. And so that is very concerning to me. A lot of our children may be in supplementary programs like Tanisha was talking about, her teaching music, right? My daughter is an artist. She painted this picture right here of this cheetah. She gets to take a break in the middle of the day when she has a thought or an imagination about something she wants to create and be able to have the ability to do that. And I'm not going to stifle her. But when she was going to traditional school, I'll tell you what, she got penalized for drawing her thoughts during the day. She got penalized for wanting to, instead of playing at recess time, for taking her art materials out to the playground. Right now, if I would have not stood up and advocated and said, you know what, I have an artist here and I am going to have my daughter, come back home and learn in an environment where she can use her creative talent, where she can use her imagination, where she's not going to get penalized, then I wouldn't have stifled her gift and her giftedness. And so I'm glad that I caught that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and allow her to. Another thing is that oftentimes children are learned different coping mechanisms. Roxanne, I heard you talk about, your daughter having anxiety. Well, a lot of kids during the pandemic are very anxious about attending in school environments or whatever that may be. And that's okay. And so what do? They learn coping mechanisms, right? And so they need to be able to have the freedom to utilize those coping mechanisms. But I'm really interested in the hypocrisy by which the legislature approaches this piece, because it says in the education code for us as parents in California that it's a part of our democratic process and protecting that process. In Education Code 51100, y'all look it up, that we as parents be co-partners in our children's educations, that we be respected, that we be allowed to collaborate about their educational needs, and that we have a voice. But yet this bill and this piece stifles our voice, because we would have to go right back to trusting the establishment that failed our children to then respect us. And so I am really wondering, is the legislature going to honor their own education code? Are they going to honor the own rules, rights, roles, and laws and responsibilities that they placed on us and said were part of the democratic processes? This makes it unequal protection under that law. And so I'm very interested to find out what they have to say about that. And I plan on pursuing that answer.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. Michael, as far as that 30%, how could you see that better used, for kids and especially high needs children as well?
Well, I mean, I could easily see it, instead of being, going to a lot of different places where fiscal insolvency has already been, shown and proven to be how they handle their own money. They could be used to really kind of reinvest in those communities, those, that are part of the school. That's what needs to really happen. A lot of these are communities of the most economically impacted and disparaged. Those communities need to be rebuilt. And there's not a lot of thought processes that go into even addressing that side of things. When schools want, people, Black and brown people that have been, just historically pushed to the back, left behind, and stepped on and over, those communities have been ravaged and devastated, and they need to be rebuilt. That's the only way you can get these families to buy back into the process, believe that they can be much more than they can, and actually strive to do that. We have so many people, we got our powerful parents right here, and we step up, we speak out, but then we have so many more than from our same communities that don't feel like they have any agency whatsoever. And so they just let things happen. They just kind of fall by the wayside, and they allow, these powers to be to make decisions that directly impact them the most. And that's the thing about a lot of these policies, like AB 1316. These policies are going to affect these people who can't. A lot of these people, who are signing on and in support of this bill, they can buy their way out of the situation. They can afford to do whatever they want to. Choice, I got money. The ultimate choice. That's their road. A lot of these people that are going to be the most impacted by this, though, we don't have that option. We don't have those means. We don't have those resources to just pivot somewhere else. So that 30% could go a whole long way to putting more support structures in place to actually help these families, to re-educate and retrain some of these people that have already been failed by the system that are my age, could help rebuild these places. It's just like all throughout California. You want to tell me that in the last 25 years, there hasn't been one Black contractor one Black land developer? Is that what you're trying to tell me now? Even the demographic makeup of California looked very, very different 30 years ago. But there are people, certain groups are being allowed to have a pass while we're still doing like this to others, though. So it's like I look all across my city, across LA, and everywhere else. Where's your Black developers? You mean we have nobody got an education? So y'all playing work then? Okay, you're playing work. Half of them are in prison. Okay, and the other half are uneducated and don't think that they could do anything because the system was built to stop them from doing anything. So that's that we could do anything with that 30%. It needs to be reinvested into rebuilding these ravaged communities and giving the spark of hope back to these people.
Yes, absolutely. These communities have just been neglected for decades, forever. I'm going to go to Tanisha real quick, and then I'm going to have Angelica weigh in on this one real quick. And then we got one more question, which is a good one. So go ahead, Tanisha. How would you like to see that 30% spent in the classroom or on students?
Well, like to say that I know that there has been a reduction in the amount of money that homeschool parents that I, have to spend for extracurricular activities. And a lot of parents that I deal with, again, as a vendor and as a parent, when you're able to have your kids be in, taking Japanese class and taking, capoeira and taking music and taking martial arts and taking cooking, and, all these were part of these institutions, and their funds have now been limited. At first, those funds should be given back to the families, because those of us who choose alternative choice, because usually our children are alternative learners, and they're not just going to, get from a book and be able to thrive. Also, adding the additional support for tutoring, for additional services, because how much that my family depends and relies on these tutors and relies on these additional people to just kind of explain it a different way and take the time to put it back in the classroom. Increase teacher salaries, because teachers should be receiving a living wage. As a teacher, you shouldn't have to live below the means. Teachers and TAs should have a living wage. So I believe that the money should definitely be reinvested into the schools, the people who are investing into our children, because just like Google gives their employees free lunch and all these great things, why aren't schools doing that as well? Because they're the ones who are preparing the kids to go and take over our future.
Yes, exactly. Angelica?
Yeah, I think I have had the privilege to be working with some charter schools very closely over this last year. In the pandemic, I've seen how they have used their resources, oftentimes, in fact, less resources than what traditional schools have used, to sort of really rise to the occasion and support students. And I've seen them implement plans and talk about how they're going to get students out of this pandemic, right? And how they're going to address learning loss. And this, the potential cut to charter schools for some schools really means losing a teacher in the classroom. There are some schools who have employed social workers to come in and help support students and families go through this crisis, and who know that as students begin to return back to campus, that there will be a need for stronger social emotional trauma-informed care. And so the cut means that they're not going to be able to bring back that social worker into the classroom. The cuts mean that they're not going to be able to invest in programs that help accelerate learning, right? We know that there's been all the data, all the stories about the learning loss that our students have experienced. And so charter schools are ready and prepared to go in and start supporting students. And the cuts mean that they're not going to be able to do a lot of those things, right? It means that they're not going to be able to do what they've always done, which is to be student-centered, right? To be innovative and flexible in their approaches in order to meet the needs of the students. And so it's going to have real effects. It's going to look very real in the classroom and in our schools. Those cuts are not about, cuts up at the top. They're cuts that are going to impact what the classroom looks like for our students at a time when we need those resources and the funds the most.
Thank you, Angelica. It's really important to have that operator perspective in these charter schools that have been stepping up during this pandemic, not just educating our kids, but feeding families, providing diapers and formula and just basic necessities that so many of our families need. And to go back to what Tanisha was saying real quickly, there is something specific in this bill that takes money away from special needs students as far as ADA money, because they're not in the classroom. So if they're homeschooled and they're not in the classroom, they want to take that money that would, serve the purpose of a building away from the parents instead of giving them more money now that we're dealing with harder times. And this is something I heard from my educator friend, Farnaz Kaufman. So they're, looking at all of these things and how it's going to impact them. We are coming to our time here, but I just want to add, if there's any last comments that anybody wants to add or anything that we might have missed, please.
I would just flag for people that on the comment in the chat comment section, there have been links, and you have the link here right in this banner. It's very easy to use. Click on the link and input your information, and it will automatically help connect you to your legislator's office. Make a call, let them know how this bill is going to impact you. They need to hear from us. Again, earlier I said our window of opportunity to be able to share the negative impact of this bill with legislators is really, really short. So you need to call today. I implore you, before you log off, click on the link and make the call to your legislator, and then tell one other person to help you make the call as well.
Thank you so much, Angelica. Thank you for bringing it back to that. Yes, our next steps are very important in any ways we can take action. I'm also going to put my email in the comments on our Speak Up feed. And so if anybody is interested in meeting with legislators in the Los Angeles area, we do have a couple meetings set up over the next couple days. Or if you just need help making that phone call, whatever it may be, you can reach out to us. Also, Families in Action has a link that you can go to reach legislators in the Oakland area, because we are trying to reach as many people statewide. So please do those calls, they track those calls and they keep count of them, how many oppose and how many in support. So get your voice in there that way. Thank you so much. I just want to thank Angelica for joining us with the LA Coalition, and Michael with Families in Action, and Christina with the National Parents Union. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for pulling this together and coming on here.
And thank you, Roxanne, and Speak Up for hosting us.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.